Hey there everyone, my name is Adarsh Dubey and welcome to another session of Open Spectrum. Today we are going to look at what is open source, what are the open source best practices you should follow, what are the common mistakes beginners make in open source, and we'll just have a discussion around what can you do better to improve your profile, learn more, contribute more, and just enjoy more. So before we begin, before I bring up Siddhant Khisty on live stream, let me just show you a quick. We have made something for you to contribute in. So if you're a beginner in open source and if you do not know much, if you do not know much like React or something like that, Python or JavaScript, and you still want to contribute, well, there are a lot of things you can do. It can go from design contributions to documentation contributions, and we have made something just like that for you. So we have a website called Open Spectrum, and you can go ahead and you can contribute in it. So basically, it needs a lot of working on. So if you know basics of React, Next, or Tailwind CSS, stuff like that, please go ahead and contribute to it. And let me just show you the quick demo to it. So I hope you all can see my screen, and this is the website Open Spectrum. So basically, we are going to this is the website of this particular event that is being hosted on WeMakeDevs YouTube and Discord. So you can go ahead and check out this website on openspectrum.wordful.app, and I will share the live stream just here. Yeah, you can go ahead and you can see. So this website is currently in development, but you can contribute to it, and we are participating in Hacktoberfest as well. So you can go ahead and check out the contributions.md, check out the issues on GitHub, and just see what all you can contribute to. So there is a lot, right? So there is no about section till now. You can go ahead and make an about section by yourself. There is no schedule section, so you can go ahead and make that. You can go ahead and make that this contact section as well. So we have been a little bit of issues, and as you can see already, we are already working on some. So someone has reported this, Vedant has reported this, and we are already working. We have already an assignee, so you can go ahead and make all that. And not just that, I'm also planning to make a whole page for each session. So suppose this is the session and we'll have a whole page for this. So we can you can go ahead and make that page, and you can contribute. Other than that, if you do not know React or Next or anything, do not worry. So suppose if we have this page, if we have the sessions page, so suppose you what you can do for contribution is you can watch the whole live stream, take notes of it, and just write that down in a Q&A form. So if I ask any question to Siddhant today, or if someone else asks any question to Siddhant, and if Siddhant or I, either of us answer that, you can go ahead and make a note of it, and then you can just add it to a simple JSON file, and you can contribute to it. So but all the visitors on this side will be able to look at those questions, and I guess that will be a win-win for everyone, for me, for Siddhant, for WeMakeDevs, and for the visitors, and for you as well. So you can go ahead and contribute in a lot of ways in this particular project. I have a link even to this one, so you can go ahead and check this out. And yeah, let's bring Siddhant on stream. So let's bring Siddhant.
Hey, Adarsh, how are you doing?
Siddhant. So we have a lot of people in chat. Hey Shreya, hey Suraj, hey Pranav.
Hey, everyone.
Uh,
All right, so before getting started, I just want to mention that originally Cavale was supposed to be here, but he was a bit under the weather. So you folks have to deal with me instead.
I guess that is totally fine. I mean,
Yep.
come on.
All right, cool. Adarsh, if you can bring my slides up, then we can get started.
Sure. Let me just grab that up and
All right, cool. So before getting started, I just want to mention that I want to do this more in a Q&A type of thing. And I've got the YouTube chat open right here on my second monitor. So please feel free to ask questions at any point in the stream. Keeping this in a very Q&A sort of manner will actually be more beneficial to you all as well. So we're today talking about the most common open source mistakes that you will make as a new contributor. Now, just because you are a new contributor doesn't mean that you can avoid these mistakes. I have personally made a lot of these mistakes when I just started out. I'm pretty sure even others made it, even Kevala made it. Pretty much everybody who's a veteran now in open source has made these mistakes when they initially started out, right? So my aim with this stream is to help you know what some of these mistakes are and hopefully avoid them as well. So let's get started. So first, a bit about me. I'm Siddhant Khisty. I'm a community manager at quite a few communities. I'm also a co-organizer at Cloud Native Community Groups Nasik, which was previously known as the CNCF Nasik chapter. I'm also a Linux and DevOps geek, and I also started my own community, which is like a place for tech enthusiasts to gather and just geek out about any sort of tech stack they love. All right, then. So let's get started with our very first mistake that folks would make during open source, which is not providing proper context. I see that Kunal is in the chat, and Kunal saying mistakes are also important to learn. And I completely agree with that. Mistakes are important. Whether you're writing code, if you make some sort of mistake, it's a really great learning opportunity. You learn a lot more compared to if you got it right on your very first attempt, right? So, talking about our open source mistakes, the first one is not providing a proper context. Now, what do I mean by this? Let's say you have found a particular issue in some big project. Let's say VLC, for example. You found that there's some sort of problem with the video encoder. So you open a issue for that on VLC's GitHub repository, and you just say that you found a problem. What problem? How are the maintainers supposed to know? How are other contributors supposed to know what exactly is this problem, right? You've provided absolutely no context. You just said problem with a video encoder, right? So that's a very big mistake because other people have got no idea what are you talking about. So instead of just providing this like one line explanation of either an issue or your pull request, what should you do instead? So first thing to do is
Kunal,
over yeah. Yeah.
forgot. I think you forgot to change the slides. Maybe.
uh 1 second. Looks like my stream has stream hang. No problem, let me just reshare.
Thank you, Kunal, for mentioning that.
Okay, let's make sure that
So
my
yes.
slide changing works. All right, cool. So, uh, so mistake number one, which we talked about, is not providing enough context, right? Not providing the proper context. So, what are some solutions for that? Number one is over explain. Now you might think that over explaining is actually bad, but trust me, in the space of open source or in the space of just asking for help with technical problems in general, the more you explain, the more likely you are to get help sooner and faster and make it easier for other people to help you as well. All right, so what does this mean? It means adding enough details. So taking the example of the video encoder, how did you find this error to begin with? Did you check some sort of log files? Did you run some Linux specific command? Is this problem happening only on Linux, or is it happening on something like a MacBook as well? Is it happening on a Windows environment? Now, you may not have a MacBook, you may not have a Windows environment, and that is totally fine. If you're running on Linux, you have a Linux environment, right? You can run all your tests in the Linux environment and put all those logs and leave it up to the other contributors to test the other environments. But let's say you don't know how to collect the details, you don't know how to over explain it. In that case, you can say that something like, hey, I found a bug with the video encoder. How do I get the necessary log files or necessary details which are required for you folks to understand this issue better? Right, that is completely fine. Then sharing screenshots is also one thing. You might not be able to share the log files because you don't know how to access them or how to generate them, but you can always share screenshots, right? Or you can take some sort of gifs, video captures. You can record a video itself and share that. That is a completely valid approach, right? Then moving on to the second
uh,
mistakes
I would
is,
like to
yep,
add on to that is that it has actually helped me a lot of times. It's not just about that contributions are not just about writing code, right? So even sharing enough details about something is contribution. And not just that, if someone else is encountering a bug, what you can do to contribute is you can also try to reproduce that bug, and you can just let them know, okay, this is reproducible on this system, I tried this and this is happening with me as well. So doing this actually helps the project quite a lot, and even like you're doing something for the project. So yeah.
yep, that's exactly right. So this actually ties into one of the other mistakes I have on the list. So just sit tight for that one as well. So the second mistake is focusing on vanity metrics. Now we've all seen folks who are just making blank PRs or blank issues, opening stuff just for the sake of opening, right? Just to get those green squares on GitHub. And frankly, that is a very wrong approach to open source contributions. You all shouldn't be focusing on the vanity metrics that, oh, I have got so many PRs. I've got like 100 PRs, 200 PRs. I've got so many commits. I've got so many green squares, so many contributions. That is frankly the wrong approach to approach open source. Instead, you need to focus on adding value. What do I mean by adding value? Let's say you find a really nice project that you really like, but you notice that its documentation is incomplete. It doesn't properly explain what the project is doing, or how should you install this project as an end user, or how do you install it as a developer, as a open source contributor, right? So you can edit that, put in more details in the readme files, in the documentation about how can this project be built, how can the end user download it. If it's Windows, then how do you install it? Do you use a package manager like Choco, or do you use an .msi installer, right? Mention all those details in the readme. That is adding value. So yeah, Kunal has a really good point here. If you explain your error or issue and do some research about your part before asking the doubt, it makes a huge difference and shows your effort. That's also a really great point about you showing your efforts, right? Let's say you ask some sort of question in a community. Let's say you ask something very basic, so like, how do I get started with open source? So it's quite likely that you will not get an answer to that, because number one, there are a ton of guides on the internet on how to get involved with open source. Second, if you just Google how to start with open source, probably the first or second result will be all that you need, right? Even if you search for it on YouTube, heck, we even have Chat GPT now. Even that can help you get started with open source, right? So put in that initial effort before you reach out and ask questions. Again, I'm skipping a bit of points because I have this later on in the slides as well, but we'll cover that again. So coming back to adding value, focus on adding value. How is this particular contribution going to benefit someone, and who will this benefit? I gave the example of documentation, right? So if you're making the documentations better for the end users installation, then you're adding value to the end users. You're making it simpler for them. If you're adding instructions on how to build the project, you're making it simpler for contributors to get involved in the project, for them to get their feet wet with the project, right? And overall, just focus on contributions that have some sort of impact. Focus on meaningful contributions, whether it's a bug report, whether it's a code contribution, whether it's documentation, anything. It can even be evangelizing a project. For example, look at Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a completely open source project, right? And still, there are so many people creating content around Kubernetes. They are teaching how to use Kubernetes, they are teaching the basics, they are teaching some advanced stuff, and just spreading awareness, teaching people how to use this open source project. That is also an actual open source contribution if you look at it, because it is adding some sort of value, right? Others, anything to add on this?
I mean, like were having a discussion a couple of days ago in the WeMakeDevs server, in the community call, and one of the points that Siddhant emphasized on this one only, it's not just about having those green squares or anything. I mean, if a person who's going to hire you, or if someone from who knows his shit, if he looks at your contribution, he will understand what is going on. So if you don't have to impress anyone by showing those green squares, because to be honest, I've seen a lot of people, especially who are my friends, or who have been with me, wanting those green squares. So it's not all about the green squares. If Siddhant is going to look at your contributions, if Kaivalya is going to look, if any, even me, we are going to understand, okay, this person is just opening blank PRs. And do you know what's worse than not having green squares? Having such bad contributions, it creates such a bad impact, that if if you and me, we are having the same type of contributions, and if you're opening blank issues or blank PRs or blank repositories as well, people are going to choose me over you any day, because no one likes that. So rather than focusing on having those green squares, I guess it is pretty much win-win for everyone if we focus on adding value to a project.
Yep, love those points, Adarsh. And speaking of having 50,000 contributions, I have actually seen that. So what I've seen some folks do is they make a certain bot, and this bot just every single day it adds like 100 commits to some private repository, which is really bad. The second most common thing about following vanity metrics that I've seen is lead code problems. Folks will make a personal repository, and inside that they'll be putting lead code solutions. To be frank, this is not adding any sort of value, right? Because number one, it's not making any existing project better. Number two, it's not adding any sort of value to end users or developers. Heck,
Hmm.
I would go as far as to argue that even if you make just some HTML, CSS, JavaScript template files for particular type of website, whether it's a portfolio website, whether it's a business website, that is also considered as adding value rather than just putting lead code stuff. Because lead code solutions you can find pretty much anywhere on the internet, and this does not have to be open source. Creating these type of templates, your simple HTML, CSS, JavaScript templates will add a lot more value, because people can simply take that, they can edit it a little bit, and they can start an entire business using just those simple templates. All right. Uh, Moving over to the next mistake, ignoring the README file. Now, if I have to mention the single most important file in any project, whether it's a open source project, whether it's a internal company project or any sort of project, it will be the readme file. Why is that? Because your README file will first of all contain what the heck is this project, how to use this project, how to build this project, and all those instructions that somebody would need to actually get started with the project. So please do not ignore the README files. As a beginner, I know it can be tempting to just dive into the code because it looks cool and writing code seems really cool, but start with the README. If you start with the README, you'll have a much easier time understanding the project and a much easier time understanding the code and contributing and making meaningful contributions as well. All right. So start with the project README. Step one that you do when you visit any sort of open source project, check out the README file. Number two, there should be a contributor guide in that project. In some projects, it may be called as contributor.md inside the GitHub repository itself, or in some other projects, in larger projects, Kubernetes, for example, they host that entire README on a separate website itself. But this main README file will always have a link to that contributor guide. So always make it a point to go through the README file. And then there might be some project specific best practices. Let me give you an example about JavaScript. JavaScript has got like 110 different types of standards, right? So the project that you're contributing to might be using standard number 56. You have no idea that it's using standard number 56 unless somebody tells you. So this point will be mentioned in the README file, or there will be this points mentioned in the contributor guide or design guide or some sort of a guide within the project. These points will be mentioned that if you're writing code, please follow these styling guidelines. If you look at ESLint will give you a ton of errors if you don't follow these best practices, right?
I guess it's not just about the README files. It is about all the files that end with .md, right? Be it README, be it contributing.md, be it codeofconduct.md. I guess when you want to learn more about a project, and when you're looking to contribute in the project, even without wasting a second, you should start reading the README file. You should start reading the contributing.md file, and you should read the code of conduct and all the other README files, right? Security.md is an important one as well. So it's and one might think, okay, like why should I read the code of conduct.md? It is going to have the same thing again and again. You have to follow some guidelines and this and that. But believe me, I have seen, bad things happening to people who have not followed the code of conduct, and it is not always intentional, right? You can even make mistakes unintentionally. So to prevent all of that and prevent every bad thing that can happen to you, just go through that code of conduct. Just go through that security.md. It will take a couple of minutes, and you will be very very much much more equipped to go on and contribute to the project.
Yep. Great points, others. Once I'm done with these slides, we'll look at an actual open source project. I have never looked at that open source project before, so that is going to be my first time looking at that project as well. So we're going to go through this exact steps, and we're going to try to find the mistakes in that. All right. So going on a little tangent, Toshik has a really interesting question. What's a monorepo and a multi repo? All right. So this comes more under your application's design architecture, right? If you're um, a little bit of prerequisite that you need to know to understand mono and multi repo. If you know about monolithic architectures and microservice architectures, then this will be a little easier to understand, but I'll do my best to explain this. So let's say your application is a monolith, which means that it's just one single application. You're not distributing it into multiple different smaller applications, right? In that case, you would want a monorepo, which means that all your all of your source code is going to exist within just one single repository. Now if you look at multi repos are usually used with a microservice architecture. A microservice architecture is just going to take your one really huge applications and break it down into smaller chunks. All right, so you have one self-contained application that does one part of the application, of the whole application. You've got another small application that does another bit of the application, right? So the source code for this application A will be in one repository. Source code for application B will be in another repository. And this way, there can be multiple different repositories containing small applications, which at the end of the day go into a platform such as Kubernetes and all act together to create one large application. So that's what mono and multi repositories are. All right, then. Moving on to our next mistake number 4, taking a know it all attitude. Now, you're an open source newbie. Just because you're an open source newbie doesn't necessarily mean that you're a code newbie as well, right? You could have years of experience under your belt before you get involved with open source, and so that might make you think that, oh, I know code stuff, I can just get into this project, I'll look at some issues, I'll dive into the code, I will understand what I'm doing. No, that is a really bad approach to take. You're going to make mistakes. Like I mentioned before, you're going to avoid the best practices, and best practices are important for a number of reasons. They either provide more readable code, they provide um, security benefits, and there are tons of other benefits for that as well. So that is why you need to follow the best practices and avoid taking a know it all approach. Instead, ask questions in the either in the repository itself, or the project will have its own little community group. Join that community group and ask your questions over there. Now, this is a really important point. Ask your questions even if you feel that they are stupid. All right. Just because you feel they are stupid doesn't mean that they are actually stupid. All right. I have, in the past, this is a personal anecdote. I have actually had this experience where I have asked a question which I felt is a really stupid question, right? But the project maintainers, they themselves come and ask, they themselves come and say, oh, I never actually thought about this. This is a very good point. So that was not actually a stupid question. But since I was a noob, for me, I thought it was a stupid question, right? So please ask your questions. Even if you think that they are stupid questions, there's absolutely no shame in asking for help if you need that. There is a correct way for asking help, and we'll look at that in another slide. All right. So there are a couple of questions here. All the multi repositories, all the multi repos are in a single project usually. Yes. So like take Kubernetes as an example. I'm just talking a lot about Kubernetes because that's what I'm more familiar with, but this can apply for any project. All right, take the Kubernetes project for example. If you go to the Kubernetes organization and go under it, you will see so many different repositories. You will see one for networking, one for the API groups, one for nodes, one for this, one for that, etc., etc., etc. So these are all sub components of the entire Kubernetes architecture, and they are different projects listed. They are different repositories listed under the same Kubernetes project, right? So yes, it is usually all these multi repositories are usually hosted under the same project. Multi repo is like a tree structure repo if you visualize it. Kind of, you can more think of it like a distributed graph. So like let's say that this is Kubernetes right here in the center. All right. So you have component A sitting here in one repository. You have component B in another repository, component C in another repository. And all these components together come together, and together they make this entire Kubernetes project as we know and use it. Okay. All right. So then moving on to the next mistake, using bad commit messages. Now, this is, I would consider this a mistake, but this is not that serious of a mistake. But still, it's better to avoid it. So, what do I mean by bad commit messages? I've given a few examples right here. When you do git commit dash m, under the message, you can put something like fixed a problem, added a new feature, hotfix in this file, inconsistent commit message. By inconsistent, I just mean the casing. So look at this message. I'm starting with smaller case, I'm moving to uppercase, I'm coming back to smaller case. There's absolutely no consistency in this, right? So this again comes into your styling guides. So let's examine each of these commit messages and see why are they wrong. So problem number one, fixed problem. What problem? I have no idea. You're just saying you've fixed a problem. What problem have you actually fixed? Have you talked about that? Mention in short that fixed problem, this problem was there and fix that. Then added a new feature. Again, what feature? Why? Which issue? That's again a question mark. Then hotfix in XYZ file. Okay, fine. You've done a hotfix. Very good. What hotfix? Why have you made this? Right? And then inconsistent commit message again for it's just plain bad. So instead, there is something really interesting called as semantic commits. If you head over to Google right now and do a Google search on semantic commits, the first link will be a GitHub gist, and that has all the information you need about semantic commits. But basically, semantic commits is just like adding a prefix, like what is the scope of your change, whether it's a fix, whether you have made a major addition, whether you have made a documentation change, whether you've made a hot fix, etc. After that, you just write a good description of whatever change you have made. So for example, the first one which I've given here as an example is a fix, change code logic to properly give certain Second.
We're back with Siddhant. Hey there, Siddhant again. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
just.
my laptop started lagging a lot. Am I back?
Yes, yes.
All right, cool, cool. I think I was low on power. Where did I leave off?
You were explaining the first commit message.
Okay, yeah. So first commit message, I make a fix, changes to code logic and giving proper values. All right. So this is just a vague one because there's no specific project. But let's say you're working on an e-commerce website. So in that, this can be something like fix, change the code logic to properly give database values. All right. That is a proper commit message. I can clearly understand what the problem was and why this fix was needed. Right. Then second one is a feature for doing something. All right. So another example in the same e-commerce website, feat feature for adding item to cart. Right. That's a really good description about what it is. Right. Then hotfix, fixed a typo in readme. Now this is pretty self-explanatory in itself. Readme had some sort of typo, some sort of grammatical mistake. This is just a simple, quick fix for fixing that. Then again, docs added some sort of improvements to the documentation. Right. Is fixed merge conflict a bad a bad commit? It not really, but if you do have that merge conflict type of commit, then usually you should squash that commit. All right. So squashing is like you're combining two or more commit messages into a single commit message. So the a commit message for fixing a merge commit, that isn't actually adding any sort of additional benefit, right? It's not giving any sort of description. It's just commit fluff, as I like to call it. So instead, you'll usually put it up as a PR, right? So inside the PR itself, you can just squash it and then merge it, right? Or using the git CLI itself, you can squash that commit and get rid of it. Keep it to some commit that actually makes sense. Now, squashing with the git CLI itself is a little more advanced, but if you are good at Googling, you can figure it out quite easily. All right. Then. Mistake number six, not using a collaborative mindset. Now, this is another really big mistake in open source. The main motive behind open source is collaboration. You might have heard many influential folks in open source, like Eddie Jowd, say that open source is all about collaboration, not actually code. Code is a small part, but the main thing is collaboration, right? And I've seen this a lot of beginners make this mistake that they take a I'm going to do this thing all by myself type of approach, right? And that is really wrong. Now, I'm not calling anybody out. When I got started, that was my exact mindset. I thought that if I asked questions to some of the project maintainers, I'm going to come off as stupid. I'm going to reduce my own reputation. So let's not do that. I'm going to try and figure it out myself. And that caused me to have a lot of assigned issues, but I never actually was able to work on them because I had that kind of mindset back then. So adapt a collaborative mindset, right? How can you do that? So step number one, ask how you can help. Let's say you want to contribute to the upstream React project. All right. Then you go explore the issues. You find one particular issue that seems kind of interesting, but you have absolutely no idea what these words mean, right? So what you can do is write there in the issue, hey, I would like to work with this, but I have absolutely no idea where to begin. Can somebody please provide me with a couple of resources which can help me get started with this? And that is totally fine because you're showing your enthusiasm, you're showing that you're willing to learn and contribute to whatever changes are required, right? That is really appreciated in open source. The willingness to learn and adapt, that is the best skill you can have, not just in open source but even in the actual industry, with software, with pretty much any other industry, to in my opinion. I'll speak for software because that's what I have been involved in. So next, discuss potential solutions. Let's say you found a issue. Now you don't just go ahead and say, hey, please let me work on this, assign it to me. Instead, what you can do is first think about it. You've asked for the resources. You've said that, okay, I've gone through all these resources, I've studied it, I know what I need to know. Now, here's the issue. How do I solve this? Think for a while. Google a little bit if you need to. Ask ChatGPT if you need to. After you have what you think is a potential solution, write that down in the issue, discuss it with the project maintainers and the other contributors who are active in the project. And don't think that, oh no, if I do this they will steal my issue, they will steal my issue. No, that is again going into the single minded thing, it's not going into the collaboration mindset, right? So discuss a potential solution first before you ask to be assigned the issue. When you have a particular solution which has been discussed, it has been reviewed by multiple people and has been accepted as a viable solution, then you can say, hey, I want to work on this, please assign this to me, I'll make the changes in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and I'll submit a draft PR soon. That's completely fine. And even if your solutions are rejected and a completely new one is proposed, take that with the open mind, because at the end of the day it's a learning experience. If your solution is rejected and the maintainers didn't give an explanation as to why, ask them, hey, you rejected my solution, but could you please explain to me why? I'm not exactly able to understand why this is not a viable solution. Would really appreciate it if you could explain this to me. The maintainers will be more than happy to explain why it's not a viable solution, either from a technological limitation, either from a integrations perspective. By integrations perspective I mean something like vendor locking. So your particular solution might be introducing some sort of a vendor locking, so other people cannot plug and play their own other open source projects into that particular section, right? So that's one thing. Take rejections with an open mind, discuss potential solutions, and just ask. Keep a collaborative mindset. Okay. Then mistake number 6, this comes into how you ask questions, is you don't do enough background research. Now, again, this directly ties into a lot of the previous points we already discussed. Let's say you got assigned a issue, you don't know absolutely anything about it, but before you actually go ahead and ask the maintainers something very stupid like, hey, this project uses React, but I do not know React, can you please give me resources for React? That is really a stupid question. I am sorry, this might come as harsh, but that is a stupid question. Something like how do I learn React is not a question that you should be asking in open source. This is a question you should go and ask ChatGPT or Google. You'll get a much clearer answer, and the exact same answer you'll get from a ton of other people. So first go ahead and learn that background knowledge which is needed. Now, let's say your project uses Golang, but you don't know a single line of Golang. Go to YouTube, go to the Go documentation, and learn first. Build a super simple project, build a calculator for all I care. And then, after you have a little bit of hands on with the base technology itself, then go and contribute to the project itself. Okay. So um value other people's time, right? Don't waste their time with a question like, hey, how do I learn Golang? Or there's this tooling in Golang called as a Cobra CLI. It's used for a lot of terminal based tools which are written in Go. So don't go ahead and ask, hey, how do I learn this thing called Cobra CLI? Now, there is an exception to this rule. If you did first go ahead and you did explore the tool a little bit on your own, but you didn't understand any of it, right? You didn't understand how to actually work with it, then it is fine to actually go and ask the maintainers for help with finding resources or finding how to understand it. You've gone through the documentation, you didn't understand it. That is completely fine. In that case, go ahead and ask for help. And that's what I mean. Extensively Google before asking questions, right? So that's again the same thing. Do your research properly before asking your help. All right. So now, a Q&A round. While the questions flow in, because the stream is on a bit of a delay, I'm going to hydrate a little bit.
uh, Till then, let me just mention a point. a really frustrating point for me, and I really wanted to mention this. Please, please, please do not ask, the maintainers to assign you the issue if you don't know how to solve it, or if you're not willing to learn how to solve it. It's totally fine if you don't know the whole solution. Even if even if you have, like Siddhant mentioned, even if you have a viable solution in your mind, if you have a potential solution in mind, then maybe you can ask the maintainers to assign it to you. But please do not ask maintainers to assign it to you if you don't know anything, because what happens is, you take that issue, you do not solve it, and then weeks later, the issue gets stale, and the bug remains like as it was, and it gets stale, so no one is going to look at that issue anymore, right? So what it does is, it basically worsens the user experience, because that issue was mentioned by someone, it was identified by someone, a lot of research has happened, and then it's just stale, no one is going to look at it anymore, and the bug remains as it. So please do not do that.
Yep,
And this
that's
was,
a great
by
point.
the way, mentioned by my friend Pranav, so thanks Pranav for that.
Yep, that's some really great points. And stale issues are a real problem, right? Stale PR, stale issues. That's a problem because it blocks other people from taking it up as well.
Like, Siddhant, I guess till then we can look at the project and
Yep,
uh,
sure.
until the questions come up.
Mm, just give me a second to pull it up. Mm-mm-mm. All right, I think I'm sharing my screen. Can you pull up the screen, Adarsh?
Yes.
All right, cool, cool. So, this is Adarsh's project, a bit of a self plugin, but again, it's a Hacktoberfest project. It's a Hacktoberfest project, so you can also contribute to this. So just go to Adarsh's profile and open up Time Loom. And now, I have not actually looked at this project before, so this is my first time looking at the project as well. So let's just see what should we look at first. So here I am in the project. My first step, readme. I'm skipping all of this. I frankly don't care about any of this just yet. I care about the readme. So Adarsh's readme has pretty good things. It has a good technology introduction about what the project is. It's talking about the tech stack. So if I want to contribute, this is the stuff that I need to learn. Then the project status. He's mentioned that it's in the build phase. So this is not even an MVP yet. It's just a very mild prototype-ish. That's what I'm getting off of it. A basic idea of what the final application is going to look like. And this is just a toy version. So again, this is just something for visualizing what it should do and what it should be like once it is complete, right? So room for improvement. This is great. And
While
project
you
board.
are
Yeah.
while you are reviewing this project, let me just grab something to write. You can continue, because I'm going to take notes, and I'm going to solve all those after the stream.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if
Sure.
anyone is
Sure.
looking at this, you can go ahead and solve all those issues as well.
Yep, awesome. So, room for improvement. You've mentioned everything that you want. You also have a project board, which is really good. We'll look at that in just a little while. Acknowledgements. This is really good because whether somebody has helped you in getting the idea for the project, whether they have helped you building the project, you need to give them credit, right? This is something. This is fine in my opinion, but personally I wouldn't put my email right here because it can lead to a lot of spam. Instead I would prefer leaving my Twitter handle or link to something like a Discord community. I know that others has its own community bios. You can rather leave the community link there so you have other contributors there as well, right? Because in your email it is just you. um, you can solve a limited set of issues and problems, right? So instead it would be better to put the community link itself where people, new contributors can come and talk with existing contributors as well. All right, so I've gone through this stuff. Now, next thing I want to do is look at the issues. Mm, so this has got a good amount of discussion. Let's take a look at some of the discussions here and see whether the discussions are good practices, bad practices, or what. So, Prakhar has given a little bug. Username text does not allow username with numbers or special characters. See, this is simple, but it explains the problem properly. Then, steps to reproduce. This is actually really important if you want to solve a bug. How do you make sure that a bug is actually a bug, right? Now, in this application, it is easy to figure out that it's actually a bug, but in something more complex, like let's take something other than Kubernetes. Let's take OBS. All right, OBS. Let's say you get some sort of weird bug. What's to say that this bug is not because of your mistake, because of user error? What's to say this bug is not because of some hardware misconfiguration, right? So there needs to be a step to way to reproduce this bug. Other contributors should be able to reproduce this bug on their systems as well, in order to confirm that this is actually a bug and not some problem in their on the person who has opened the issues end, right? And then again, there's a screenshot which is really good for context. While if I put in main branch, what is preferred way to solve it in all right, so there's a really good question. If you push one bad commit branch, what is a good way to solve it? I would say you can either squash it, or if you're usually you would want to go through pull requests, right? If you're going through a pull request, then you can edit the commit message as well, but it's a little bit of a hassle to do that. So the best practice would be to give the proper commit messages to begin with. Now, I do realize that this might not be possible in every single situation. I have had to make multiple commits just to get GitHub Actions to work properly. So in that case, I can't exactly make a pull request. I'm just going to have to directly commit to the main branch, right? In that case, it is fine, but try not to make it a habit. One occasional bad commit is fine, but like I mentioned about semantic commits, right? So there's one particular GitHub action, I don't know what's its name, but what that does is it just reads those commit messages, and based on those commit messages, it makes your changelog files automatically. So you don't need to sit and write your entire changelog that from version 1 to version 2 all these things have changed. Instead, that GitHub action will just compare the commits from the release version 1 to between version 1 and release version 2. What all commit messages are there? They are semantic commits. Oh, great. This makes it a lot easier to just automatically generate the change log, right? So that's why I mentioned about semantic commits as well. It makes it easier to generate a change log as well. Okay. Let's come back to this issue. So others is talking about possible solutions and what are some possible ways to fix it. So that's really good. And then again, labels, right? Labels are really good. Labels are really good way to filter out issues, especially in bigger projects. And if you're a first time contributor in any project, look for this good first issue thing. This is a really good place to get started. And if you don't want to sit and triage it yourself, by triage I just mean bug hunting, figuring out how to do something. Look for things where there are help wanted. All right, because help wanted issues with the tag help wanted, people generally know how to do it, they just don't have the time or the energy to actually do it themselves, right? So you can go and help them out with that. If you don't know how to do it, you can just ask them for a general approach about what should you do, and that's how you can do, right? So this is a really good contribution thread about discussing the problem, discuss discussing potential solutions. Been speaking for a while, my tongue isn't able to speak anymore. So yeah, this is a really good issue. Let's take a look at some other issues. Let's take a look at this one. Mm, See, this is again a a bit of a bad issue, right? Because you have just mentioned that there should be a light mode for the website, but you have not mentioned how to do it, right? Then again, here I would like to work on this feature. Instead of this, talk about how are you actually going to do it. Are you going to implement your own custom css patterns and then integrate it with Tailwind, or are you going to get some sort of uh, css templates from somewhere on the internet? Have you found some css templates that way? Share those, and then talk about how you're actually going to solve it. Will be a better practice, right? All right then. So that's that. Let's take a look at the pull request. So yeah, again, we saw the issue that Prakar opened, right? So this is the one which has been solved. There doesn't seem to be any feedback on it just yet, but again, I would say that this is also kind of a bad way to open a PR, because it's just mention the entire issue itself. This is fine. You have to mention which issue does this PR fix, but mention it properly as well. Now, this part is a little useless in my opinion, because if you open the issue, you'll know exactly what the bug is, right? So instead, would be better to mention what have you changed. Now here in the code, they have just changed some regex patterns, right? So in the PR, they can mention that found what's the actual bug. The bug was a certain regex pattern which I have changed, and now it shouldn't provide the error anymore. That makes it a lot easier to review as well. Okay, now let's come to the projects board, time looms feature section. Now, this is actually a really nice feature. I love projects which implement the projects board, because then you can see what all features does the project have uh, in its timeline, what all folks are working on, what all is done. All right. So this is overall a pretty good way. So yeah, I came here with the intention of finding some mistakes, and I found quite a few mistakes in terms of how folks contribute. I'm pretty sure if I go through the commits and PR histories, I might find a bit more. And I also found some things which are really good about the project, right? So that's that. Mm-mm. Well, others. All right. We can take some audience questions now. If you folks have any questions, feel free to ask. I'd be more than happy to answer. And even others can come up and ask some questions. Okay, Adarsh has asked a nice question. Suppose I make a good commit but forgot one change. Should I make a new commit or revert the commit and then make changes and commit again? Uh, squashing. Squashing is the best approach you can have for this. Just make your new commit, but again, you're probably going to put it into the main branch through a PR, right? So in that case, just squash it before you merge it into the main branch, just so that it stays consistent. I actually prefer squashing pull request, because then it becomes a lot easier to keep an entire track of changes. Okay, I think Adarsh is having a few technical issues. I'm a beginner and learning front end. Give me some. Can I do this contribution? Okay, so I'm not really a front end developer, so I can't guide you on the technical front. But if you're asking that can you do open source contributions in with front end technologies, then the answer to that is yes, you absolutely can. All you have to do is find some projects which are using your particular tech stack. All right. So let's say you know only vanilla HTML, CSS, JavaScript. There are probably plenty of projects out there which use just plain HTML, CSS, and JavaScript without any sort of framework, right? So that is pretty good. You can use just this. You'll have to find some projects. A better way to find projects to contribute is learn something like React and Tailwind. That gives you a lot more scope to contribute to projects. um, Something like Angular is also good. A lot of projects use Angular. React is probably the most popular as far as I am aware. But yeah, you can probably join the WeMakeDev server and ask some folks over there. There will be there are definitely folks over there who are a lot more experienced with front end technologies. Well, do we have any other questions? Otherwise, we can probably end the stream. And just a reminder, the stream is on a bit of a 1 minute delay. So even if you've asked your question, it will probably take a bit of time for me to actually read and answer. Is algorithm very necessary? It depends on what kind of algorithms you're talking about. If you're talking about something like DSA, complicated DSA, then the answer is probably no. Because frankly speaking, you are probably not going to use that complicated algorithms within any sort of real world project unless it is a database or something like ML models where you actually need to process data in a very intricate, in a very efficient way, right? The only types of projects where I've seen algorithms being very necessary are databases, at least for now. It's just databases and ML projects that I've seen needing complicated algorithms. And database, I mean, if you're contributing to something like SerialDB or MongoDB, the actual database as a project itself, not using the database in your own full stack application. Contributing the actual database, how does that data handle its own data? That's the type of stuff I'm talking about. All right. Uh, One last question before we wrap up. How do you perform removing commits from your repository? Revert or reset? Now, this is actually quite interesting. Revert should be used when your commit is merged into the repository. It gets deployed into the source code, whatever, but then you realize that it has a very fatal error. In that case, you will revert just the latest commit. Now, reset is used to return to a specific commit, right? So, let's say you want to um, remove 5 old commits. In that case, you would use reset, but you just want to remove the latest commit, the most recent commit. In that case, you will use revert. That's the main difference between revert and reset. And the next question is, for example, how did so that's the thing, like if it's just one latest commit, wrong commit, then you use get revert. If you have to get rid of multiple commits, then you use get reset. So even when you do get reset, you need to get the commit ID of that particular commit, and then you reset up to that commit. Yep. All right then. So this was a great stream. Do remember to tweet about this stream, take a screenshot, and then you can tweet about it, share what all you have learned, and do join the WeMakeDev server, and we can have some further conversations around open source. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next stream. Bye bye.